do you think it costs people money to be remote?
Before the pandemic, I have data going back to like 1990. It used to be when you work from home, you had to take a big pay cut. Controlling for someone's age, gender, education, industry, etc. You'd see work from home folks are paid like 10% less. If you do the same analysis now in 2024, it turns out they're typically paid more. If you think, who do we know that's working from home? It tends now to be basically managers and professionals.
Yeah.
Having said that, there are some roles, law firms, sometimes they may go to associates and say, look, there's two paths for you. One is you come in 3-4 days a week, you get mentored and you train, you make it up to partner. The other is you come in less days, you become an expert, and you go down this kind of side track and you end up getting paid less. If you are coming in less than other folks in your office, you may end up falling behind a bit and that may damage your salary. But if you're coming in the same with the rest of the firm, I just don't really see it. It costs you money.
Hey everyone, I'm Jean Chatzky. Thanks so much for joining me today on HerMoney. So I've got to ask, are you listening to this podcast on your commute to work, on your commute home from work? Or maybe you're listening in your laundry room as you put in a load of clothes between calls because you work from home. As many of our listeners know, my company, HerMoney, has been fully remote since we walked out of our New York City WeWork in March of 2020. And since then, our team members have moved across the country. Some are in Alabama, Connecticut, Texas, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, still in New York. And I got to say, it has been amazing, but yeah, you knew that there was a but coming. I miss my friends. I miss the friends that I sat with for so many years on the train during my morning commute. I miss grabbing a salad at my favorite deli and sitting outside in the park on a crisp autumn day. I miss just walking into the next office to shoot the shit with somebody and think up new ideas. And would I trade that for the flexibility of being able to work from anywhere at any time? Actually, I probably would. But I also think that I am a rarity in that because I don't think that Zoom collaborations are nearly as much fun as in-person ones. I would give a lot to see my team back together. And many CEOs feel differently. But one biggie, Andy Jassy, CEO of Amazon, recently mandated that employees have to come back to work 5 days a week. So did Elon Musk. For both employees of Tesla and Twitter, many banking institutions have called employees back, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan. The thing is, when you ask employees, 60% of Americans want a hybrid role. 37% want to be fully remote. That's according to new research from Robert Half, which is a staffing solution firm. This report, and we will dive into it a bit during this interview. We'll also link to it in the show notes. It takes a deep dive into exactly which industries and roles and seniority levels are able to work from home. Interestingly, despite the fact that there's been much ado about more companies mandating a return to the office, the report showed that fully on-site roles continue to trend downward across all industries. During the first quarter of 2023, 80% of new job postings were on-site only, but in the second quarter of 2024, just 67% were, meaning that 33% of all new job postings today are either hybrid or fully remote. But what does the future hold? As we head into 2025, what are we looking at? It's a question that I am really excited to dig into. And today I'm going to do just that with Nick Bloom, Stanford Professor of Economics and expert on the subject of working remotely. Nick was dubbed the prophet of remote work by Fortune magazine and America's best work from home expert by Business Insider. You hear him giggling at those accolades. Nick, welcome to the show.
Jean, thanks so much for having me on. It's fun to be here.
Nice to see you. Nice to talk to you as we both work from home. I want to start with Amazon's mandating 5 days a week in office. What does this mean for the rest of us?
So Amazon's case is pretty unusual. Amazon was basically doing a headcount reduction. So look, they hired a ton of people in 21, 22, that post pandemic rebound. They get to the end of 23, mid 24, and they're like, we've got too many employees. And they're thinking, look, what are we going to do? One way is you fire a bunch of folks. It's very expensive. You have to pay severance pay. It generates a lot of upset individuals. You can imagine you go get laid off, everyone else in your team is wondering what's going on. So instead, they decide they're going to call everyone back to the office 5 days a week and hope that about 5 or 10% of employees will quit. Do I support it? No. Would I advise other firms to do it? Probably not, because there's an enormous cost to it. Is guess who's going to quit? If you're Amazon and you're the hottest AI engineer out there, you're going to leave and go join OpenAI and Microsoft. So not surprisingly, the day Amazon announced that their stock price fell 3%. It's seen as headcount reduction. It's seen as cutting costs, slowing growth, but I don't think it's an omen for the rest of us.
So where are we in terms of the work from home curve or the hybrid work curve? Are we in the middle of a shift back? Or like those statistics from Robert Half's report, are we actually giving employees a little more leeway?
If you like work from home, the good news is things really aren't changing overall. So I have monthly data going back to actually before the pandemic. And for about the last couple of years now, going back to the beginning of 2023, it's been very stable. So sure, there are companies like Amazon calling folks back, like Zoom, etc. But there are others that are allowing more work from home as leases expire or CEOs discover this is the way to go. So actually, this isn't going anywhere. In fact, interestingly, living out in Silicon Valley, I talked to a ton of startups, and there's kind of amazing technologies on the horizon. So think of virtual reality, holograms. I was at a company a few weeks ago that has like a massive 13-foot by 13-foot screen. So, Gene, me and you could be like full body meeting. I could see your trousers, your shoes. There are things that are making basically remote more like in person, but you still don't have to leave your home office or bedroom. And that is 3-5 years away. I mean, think of Apple, for example. Apple brought out that big headset and
Right.
Meta's been working on their headset. The reason they've done that is because work from home's taking off. And I was talking to a friend at Meta and they're saying, look, when we have remote meetings, we actually use these headsets. They said it doesn't always work that well, but we try and we're getting better at it.
When you look at what work from home does to productivity per employee or per company, what do we know now?
Okay, so good question. The upside of work from home is it's quieter. So for most people, not everyone. I mean, there's kids, pets. Certainly someone told me their dog sits at their feet, looks up, waiting for treats all day. They said it's like really hard. But typically it's quieter, so it's good for concentration and you avoid the commute, which saves a lot of time. In fact, I had some research showing that also folks that work from home don't tend to take lunch breaks. It's the death of many laptops is toast. So work from home is great for that. The downside is it is harder for mentoring. For example, I have 2 college-age kids and they don't really want a fully remote internship. It can be harder for innovation and meetings. That's why a lot of companies have ended up with hybrid. The thought process is you come in 2-3 days a week, you get a bunch of face-to-face time connecting up, and you work from home 2-3 days a week. And there are some other roles that they say are fully remote. Imagine if you're, I don't know, you're mid-late 30s, 40s, you're very experienced, you've learned well, you don't need that much face-to-face interaction. You may be fully remote and meet up, say, once a month. That's also become quite common.
I was thinking back to when I first had children, and my kids are now in their late 20s, early 30s. So it's been a while, but I feel like I was one of the early experiments in hybrid work. I cut a deal with my boss at the time to work from home 2 to 3 days a week. And I felt like my at-home days were more productive, but I also felt like I didn't lose out on those walk to the next office, shoot some ideas back and forth that is so important in keeping up the creativity that a lot of offices depend on. Former Nike CEO John Donahue actually blamed remote work on the company's lack of innovation. Nike has been struggling lately. Do you agree with that? Do you think that innovation happens or is more likely to happen when we're together?
I mean, CEOs have a habit of blaming, they accept the credit for good performance and blame something else for poor performance. And often it's the weather or strikes or bad luck. And in that case, yes, I saw that. He blamed remote work. If you are fully remote, it can be harder to innovate. That is true. So think of a meeting where everyone's in person, they're often engaged and chatting and, discussions happen before or afterwards or maybe over coffee. When you're fully remote, it's a tendency for folks to get on email and do other things and not really paying attention. On the other hand, you don't need to be fully in person every day. I just tell you about myself. I teach in person. Teaching is definitely better in person. We have seminars, talks, meetings. If they're bigger, they tend to be in person, but a lot of one-on-ones, reading, writing is best at home. I don't agree with Nike's view. You don't need to be in every day. I definitely don't agree with that, what Amazon have done. Again, some of these are either moves by CEOs to blame something else or a way to kind of shift a few thousand headcount.
So how do you strike the best hybrid work balance? If you were to write a prescription for hybrid work, what would it look like?
I'll tell you what the plain vanilla is. It's kind of like ice cream. I think vanilla is like 20% of sales. Most people don't eat vanilla, but it's still the most popular flavor. So vanilla for hybrid is in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, at home Monday, Friday. I would probably start with that. I'd make sure folks come in on the in-office days. The thing that sends people mad is coming in and then spending all day on Zoom. You're like, why did I come in to just sit and take Zoom calls? So you do need the whole team in. If you discover that folks are in the office and doing a lot of memos, reading, writing stuff, you're like, maybe we've got too many days in. Maybe we drop back to just 2 days, Tuesday, Thursday. If on the other hand, people say these office days are great. I mean, it doesn't seem very likely, but it might be. Then maybe you go up to 4 days. But I would probably start with 3 in the office, 2 at home, and then experiment from there.
You published a paper recently in the publication Nature studying the effects of a hybrid schedule, and you found A, it improved job satisfaction, B, it reduced the rate of people quitting by 1/3, which is, I think, highly significant, and C, it didn't affect performance reviews. But what was the data in between the margins there? How much face time did we need to make a difference? Did this hold true for certain types of workplaces, but not for others? What's in between those numbers?
So basically, a huge company called Trip.com, which is one of the world's big travel agents, they're like Expedia. They have 40,000 employees. They're quoted on NASDAQ. Probably many people have used them. They took 1,500 employees and they randomized them. This was like a massive scientific experiment. If you had an even birthday, so you're born on the 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th of the month, you came in 5 days a week. And you have an odd birthday like me on May the 5th, you got to work from home on Wednesday, Friday. So that's the setup. They ran this thing for 6 months. They collected up to 2 years of data. And they really didn't know what to think. As the academic was like really not sure. What they found was just first, as you said, no effect on performance, like none. And when you went, they looked at lines of code written, promotions, leadership scores, innovation scores, performance reviews. When you interviewed folks, they said, look, it's really useful coming in for mentoring, meetings, presentations, but 3 days is already quite a lot. That's a lot of in-person time. And those extra 2 days a week are great for quieter thinking, reflection, less exhaustion. So 3 seemed about right for them. And then the other side of it was quit rates fell by 1/3. And maybe it's not surprising, but folks really liked being able to work from home 2 days a week. And for Trip, they said, look, this is just a no-brainer because every person that quits cost them about $50,000. They said, look, you've got to think about it. Someone quits, you've got like a gap in the team. You've got to fill it. You've got to go out and you advertise, recruit, train someone up. And so they said, look, hybrid is increasing profits by millions of dollars a year. And when I talk to managers, if you want to persuade your manager to go to hybrid, that's ultimately the best way to do it, is to say, look, it's very, very profitable to let employees work from home 2-3 days a week. Generally, execs are less sympathetic to I like it or is good for society, which it is. They're generally much easier to persuade by saying it's going to make more money for the company.
I want to talk about the flip side. I want to talk about the impact on employees and the idea of getting promoted when you're working remotely. Some of the action steps that you can take to get the flexibility that you're looking for at work. We're going to take a quick break, though, before we do that. And we are back with Nick Bloom, Professor of Economics at Stanford, remote work expert. We've been talking a lot about the impact on companies, the impact on managers. You also found in your research that remote work doesn't impact the likelihood of hybrid workers getting promoted. And yet the narrative, the anecdotal stories that we hear is that it might be harder if you don't have enough face time to convince your boss or your boss's boss that you're the right person for that step up.
So it's really one of those things of you don't want to be totally out of line with your coworkers. So I'll give you two different setups. Imagine you're in a team, everyone's working from home Monday, Friday. If you come in Monday, Friday, so you're in 5 days rather than 3, it's not likely to help your promotion. No one else is around, the boss isn't around, your colleagues aren't around. It's fine to come in, but you're kind of sat in an empty office. On the other hand, if you're in a team where everyone works from home Monday, Friday, and you work from home 5 days a week, that is likely to be pretty costly. You're going to be missing out on meetings. They're going to say, where's Nick? Oh, well, he's not here. Should we connect him on Zoom? Nah, it's too hard. No one wants their laptops open. We'll just catch up with him after the meeting, etc. So the first thing is you want to be aligned with the rest of your team, which means if you really want to say work from home 4 days a week, the best way to do it without suffering on promotions is find a role in your company or a different job where everyone else is working from home 4 days a week. So for example, I was just talking to Zillow that do the house price data. They've basically gone to a kind of cloud HQ. So they are pretty much fully remote. If you work to Zillow, they'll be fine. You're not going to fall behind on promotions if you're working from home. If you say we're at Goldman Sachs and everyone else is in 5 days a week and you're fully remote, true enough, you're likely to get forgotten about and passed over for promotions.
So you really have to line it up. A similar question, but about salaries. A recent survey from ZipRecruiter found working from home could cost you $22,000 a year. Now, I don't have the data between the lines of that study, but in general, do you think that's true? Do you think it costs people money to be remote?
I don't know that study either. I tell you what I do know, which is what's interesting is before the pandemic, I have data going back to like 1990. It used to be when you work from home, you had to take a big pay cut. So if you go back and look in the 90s, controlling for someone's age, gender, education, industry, etc., you'd see work from home folks were paid like 10% less. And the view was, well, you can do it, but we're going to slash your pay. If you do the same analysis now in 2024, it turns out they're typically paid more. It's actually a perk. I mean, if you think, who do we know that's working from home? It tends now to be basically managers and professionals. If you go into, McDonald's or Chipotle, the folks there that are some pretty low paid, they're in every day.
Yeah.
So having said that, there are some roles whereby, take law firms. Sometimes they may go to associates and say, look, there's two paths for you. One is you come in 3-4 days a week, you get mentored and you train, you make it up to partner. The other is you come in less days, you become an expert and you go down this kind of side track and you end up getting paid less. So yes, if you are coming in less than other folks in your office, you may end up falling behind a bit and that may damage your salary. But if you're coming in the same with the rest of the firm, I just don't really see it. It costs you money.
I want to do a little me-search and ask you about the kind of situation that we have going on at HerMoney. We were largely New York-based pre-pandemic. Everybody scattered, including me. I'm living in Philadelphia these days. And having an office where we get together is not something that looks likely. What does that do to companies? And what have you seen about sort of the best way to handle it from a morale perspective, from a productivity perspective, from a cultivating your people sort of perspective?
So great. So, Gina, I'm now going to interview you, I guess. You're going to turn this around. But do you meet in person, like every other month or every 3 months? Do you have a HerMoney get together?
We don't. I mean, we have small HerMoney get-togethers. I see my colleagues probably once a month or once every other month, but not all of them. I sort of see one here, one there when we have specific meetings or demos or things like that. We have not all gotten together in a year, maybe more.
That's interesting. The reason I ask is there are a lot of firms, and they're particularly kind of tech firms, some finance firms, think professional services, that are fully remote, but they tend to have regular get-togethers. So they may be once a quarter, they may be once a year. I'm thinking of Atlassian type places or Zillow. And the way this works is it's not the same as being in person every day, but once every 3 months you get together. And if we meet in person, we spend 2 days together. Somehow I don't really need to be so much in presence with you for the next 2 or 3 months. It is harder if you're fully remote. If you've never physically met someone, that does make it a little trickier because there's things you miss out on. On the other hand, you can hire people around the world. I was actually talking to a company saying, Deal, and they said one of their biggest, most common hiring flow is American companies hiring Argentinian coders. And the American companies never meet the Argentinian coders. The Argentinian coders are fantastic and do great work. But it does end up being a little bit more transactional. It's hard to kind of think about developing a career and managing a team if you're fully remote.
All right, let's say I'm an employee and my company has mandated you got to go back 5 days a week, and I don't want to. This is something that I don't want to do, but I'd very much like to continue to work for this company. Any wiggle room for me, and how do I ask for what I want?
Well, the first thing worth knowing is these mandates are often not enforced. The CEO says one thing and what happens on the ground is another. I was at a company a couple of weeks ago and they were saying, well, the mandate is 3 days a week. And I was talking to the head of HR and saying, well, what do you actually see? And she was saying, well, we see 1.8 days a week of swipes. And I was like, well, that's quite a big gap. And she said, well, people are out on business travel, which counts as days in the office, but we're really not sure. So if your firm mandates 5, one question, like with Amazon, just to step back, has said that everyone's going to be in the office 5 days a week from January. What will happen? Nobody quite knows. It's kind of like you've had kids, I have kids, telling them bedtime's 9 o'clock. Sometimes means 9 and sometimes means something radically different. So take the case of Amazon. Imagine you're, a hot AI coder and you have tons of outside offers. My guess is your manager is going to say, look, come in 3. Let's keep quiet about the other 2 because I need you in my team to perform. So I'd wait to see what happens on the ground because maybe it's never enforced. If after 3 to 6 months they're getting tough, at that point you probably have to take the choice of stay in the firm, see if there's another team that gives you a bit more flexibility, and if not, it may be a case of moving jobs. And in fact, that's what Amazon's wanting. It's looking to 5 to 10% of its employees to basically quit because they want hybrid somewhere else.
Okay, now flip it for me, right? I've got kids that are in their 20s, early 30s. They have dogs that they picked up during the pandemic. They have no interest in going into an office 5 days a week. But if they were presented with a scenario where they had to go in some, what do you say to them to convince them that it's good for them?
Generally, what we see is folks in their 20s want to go in 3-4 days a week. And the reason is it falls away. So if you look at people, the people that are most keen on fully remote in the data are in their 30s and 40s and have young kids. So you have kids, it's fantastic to be home for care duties. You maybe got more money, a nice house or an apartment. Folks in their 20s, they're earlier in their career. They really want to get mentored. They often want to socialize more. There may, be 4 of them sharing an apartment and no one wants to work from home in their bedroom. My oldest 2 are 21 and 19. And I'm like, you guys, they're getting summer jobs right now. One of them's about to start full time. I'm advising them to go in at least 3 days a week. Maybe in their 30s, you cut back. But it's certainly the case there are benefits in your 20s from being in person. Now, again, there's always exceptions. One of the striking groups we've seen that has benefited a lot from the pandemic is Americans with a disability. So these are folks that maybe couldn't go in 5 days a week. And now, if the option is fully remote working versus not working at all, clearly fully remote is a much better deal. So I would say if you can go in, you probably want to go in 2-3 days a week in your 20s, at least because it helps you progress your career. 30s onwards, it's much less obvious.
When you're thinking about those people with young kids or with caregiving responsibilities for an older parent who really are valuing this opportunity to be remote, I think sometimes, and I've always been a get the work done kind of a boss. and a get the work done kind of a worker. And if that means that I didn't get my run in the morning, but I'm going to do it at 11 because I don't have a meeting, I don't care. And I don't think anybody should really care. But I do know there are some times when people give off the impression working from home that they're not really working. How do you show up best when you're working from home?
I have two big lessons for managers. In fact, we wrote it up in the recent Harvard Business Review piece. One is when people come into the office, you should coordinate. So there's these rules whereby everyone has to come in on 2 days, but you don't say which, and different people in on different days. It is kind of like crazy because, I come in and Gene, you're not in, and you come in and what's the point of being on Zoom? I mean, the anecdote, I have a friend of mine that said, I come in Monday, Friday. And I was like, that's odd because most of your colleagues aren't in there. And she said, yeah, that's just the point. I don't like my colleagues. So it's like, okay, so the first thing is coordinate. The other thing is when you're in the office, you can get away with kind of management by walking around, watching what people are doing. So if you're my boss, I'm at my desk typing away. When you walk by, is it, Excel or Python, whatever I'm supposed to be doing? Or am I just sitting watching Champions League soccer or something? So you can kind of manage people by wandering around in the office. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's kind of livable. When people are working from home, you cannot see what they're doing. And so you have to focus more on performance or output. So the other critical thing is what I call performance management. So you'd say, Nick, you're at home, let's say Friday, you've got to get these tasks done. It's up to you how you do it. And if you want to say, I don't know, go for a run or go to the dentist, that's okay. But you have to make up for it in the evening on the weekend. And that works really well. So I'd say, but the second big thing is performance management. You've got to focus more on achievements and performance for home-based employees and less on how quickly they respond to an email, because that doesn't really work for either the manager or the employee.
Last question. If you are someone who really does want to be fully remote in the future and who wants to assure themselves that they're going to be able to continue to work this way going into the future, what kind of jobs, what kind of career path would you suggest that they carve out for themselves?
So there are a lot of fully remote jobs right now. So about 10% of Americans are fully remote, which is about 20 million people. This is quite common. Long run, the thing I'd be worried about is anything that's relatively repetitive, low skill, because that kind of stuff is either going to be offshore to the Philippines or Argentina, or actually be replaced by AI. So you want to move out of data entry, call centers, very basic HR. So it's going to be more creative stuff. It's going to be more design, more kind of high end. The other thing that's valuable is being able to meet in person, say once every other month. So you can live in Wyoming or Hawaii or Alaska and just fly in and out once every other month, because AI can't do that. And someone in the Philippines can't do that either. So I talked to a friend of mine who's running a company, and she was saying, she told all the employees, would you want to be fully remote? And they said, yeah, we'd all love to be fully remote. She said, well, you've got to be aware that if that's the case, when we advertise for promotions, we're going to put this on a global scale, because of course we can hire people globally. And at that point they went, oh no, actually we changed our minds. We want to come in 1 day a week or 1 day a month, etc. So it's worth thinking about what you can do that someone in, say, the Philippines or AI can't, and just making sure there is some value. And that may just be meeting in person every other month. And that's something that AI can't do, and realistically will never be able to do, at least for the next 20 years. Beyond that, who knows?
All right, I lied. One more question.
Okay.
In 2020, when we went into that year, I don't think we had any clue what the pandemic would bring and what life would look like now as far as work goes. We're about to enter 2025. What does it look like in 2030?
Great point. So yes, I had no idea. No one had any idea in 2020. Right now, so right at the end of 2024, I think it's much clearer. So the next 2 to 3 years, work from home is going to be very stable. Don't believe the headlines. The reason the headlines are full of return to the office stories is journalists get rewarded for articles that people click on and send around on social media.
Oh, I know.
So in actual big data, I have tons of data sets. Work from home is very stable. It's going to be like this for the next 3-4 years. By 2030, tech is going to be quite a lot better. So we'll be looking at large screens, headsets, holograms. That's going to mean it's not like we're all fully remote, but say rather than coming 3 days a week, you may be coming 2 or 1. So long run, work from home is clearly going to rise.
And if we're looking at full screens, no more business on the top, party on the bottom.
Having said, well, yeah, I'm not going to tilt my camera down, but I am actually in shorts. So
Yeah,
yes,
so
I'm
there
wearing
you go.
a smart shirt. Yes. Or maybe it'd be acceptable. It's a bit like in 2019, having a dog bark in a meeting, or the sound of a kid was really not okay, even if you're working from home. In 2024, it's totally fine. We've had everything. One of my kids plays the bagpipes, and I tell you, they are phenomenally loud. Like, just think of a jet engine, but coming from Scotland or something, and that quite often creeps into the background of meetings, and people are like, "What the heck is that noise?" And I'm like, "Don't ask. Let's just stick on the meeting."
I grew up with a brother who played the drums, so I think I have some idea. Nick Bloom, thank you so much. This was fun.
Gene, thanks so much for having me on. It was fantastic.